Well, let's get into it. We had you here last summer. You were going into your first season as a starting quarterback in Big Ten in a uh, big time program. Y'all had a phenomenal year. You won 9 games, won bowl game, and all that deal. What have you learned going through that 12 game process, all those practices, all those meetings, as being the guy and the starter? What did you learn this year?
Yeah, I think every single day and every single rep, every single game, you have to be the same person. And I found out pretty early in the year that, like against Cal, I was a little up and down the whole game. Kind of getting frustrated on the sideline with some situations that that can be out of your control. And I think when everyone's looking at you, you got to be in constant communication with everybody, but just be really calm. And that's the number one thing I learned. And I thought I did a good job the rest of the season. Even during the negative games like Iowa, obviously not performing well and having a bad game there, it's like, just continuing to fight, continuing to be the same person throughout the whole thing, because it's not always going to be smooth sailing. So I think, just not riding the roller coaster of college football, where it can be, up and down sometimes. It's not going to always be easy. I mean, there's only one team left that's not lost a game this year. So I think it's, just staying the course and, trusting your process and trusting your coaches.
But no doubt, you hit a little bit. Talk to us, our audience, and in your quarterback, and in this area, everybody, they keep up with you and look up to you. What were some of the highs? And you hit it. Y'all won some big rival games this year, obviously the bowl game. And what were some of the lows? And how'd you keep yourself steady? And you hit it a little bit, and how'd you pull yourself out of it?
Yeah. I think like in high school, you never really hit true adversity because it's not that hard, to be completely honest, for a guy like me and the team that I was on. We were able to go 13-0 my senior year, so it feels like football's pretty easy. And then you get into college football, and my first game starting against a MAC team, I even realized against a MAC team, I was like, this is pretty hard, because they're giving you new looks, especially me being my first year starting. They're giving me a lot of different looks, trying to pressure me, show different disguises in the coverage. I'll do a lot of post-snap things to try and get my eyes. But I think there was a lot of highs and lows, and I think ultimately you learn as a first-year starter, like I said, to stay the course and be the same guy through it all, because it can get real rocky if you try to ride the roller coaster of emotions of being super high one week and then being super low. And I feel like I truly understood that after we beat Nebraska on a Friday and we had a storm rush because they were ranked. And then the next week, we're going into our biggest rival against Iowa, and we get beat 41-3, and no one saw it coming. Like, we thought we were going to go in there and beat them. And then when that happens, it's an 8-day shift of, like, you kind of realize you're just on this super, super high of, beating a ranked team at home, having a storm rush, first storm rush as a starter. You're 5-2. You're going into Iowa. If you win, you're probably ranked. So you're feeling really good about yourself, and then you just get, completely just destroyed, and you throw 3 picks, and you're leaving that game thinking, like, wow, like what could I have done differently to really, have a different effect on that game? But I think ultimately you learn so much things throughout the season. And I think I was able to come back, and then the next week we beat Michigan State, and I had a game winner. And I think, that was me just staying the course, being who I am. And that ultimately happened from the beginning of the year, losing to Cal, because, Cal was really a really rough game for us as a team, but really just me emotionally, because I wasn't used to, having to fight from behind and, not being able to, feel like I can do what I do. So it gets challenging in college football. And I think the more you rely on your coaches and trust them and trust the people around you, I think you'll be in a better situation.
Awesome, Murray.
One of the things that we talked about before you came on was transfer portal is chaos right now. We're right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
You have the success that you have. Do people come knocking? Is there a little bit of NIL thrown at you, or your teammates?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely that stuff. But I mean, I signed really quickly to kind of stay away from that stuff. Like, I had signed right before the Wisconsin game, because I kind of knew that I wanted to come back and have another year under my belt at the same school, not have to go learn a new system, learn new coaches, all that kind of thing. And also, I think it can be challenging, to go pick up. I could go pick up a playbook, obviously, but to feel super comfortable with your coaches, have that connection where me and my OC is super, super close, Coach Harbaugh. So I can, go in there and say I really like a play, or, during a Wednesday, I'd be like, hey, Coach, I really don't like that play on third down. Like, I'm not comfortable with it. I don't feel comfortable because we haven't repped it enough. And he'll be like, okay, I'll take it out. So, just things like that I think, you don't get at a lot of schools. where I don't take for granted. And, obviously as a young quarterback when you're playing, that makes you feel super comfortable when your coach is like, hey, I'll take that out. So I obviously really appreciate that.
I think that's what the game is missing right now, is a lot of what you just spoke on, and to be able to stay at the same place and develop and grow the people around you is incredibly important, especially you and your receivers.
Yeah.
As that receiver room changes, how important is it for you right now when you get back to campus to maybe build those new relationships?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think there's a lot of things you learn because last year I feel like I couldn't necessarily be the leader I wanted in the offseason because you kind of have to earn your stripes and play some games and take some hits for your teammates and for your O-line to really have that full respect and win some big games. So I feel like this offseason will be a little bit different for me as a leader and for the people around me. Yeah, and those relationships are huge to build from January to July because I feel like once you get to fall camp, you are where you are as a team. You're obviously going to get better during that time, but that's you are who you are once you get to August. And you can get better during that time, but there's not much time to get better. So I think, the relationship piece, doing extra work together, getting outside of the football realm and hanging out as people and getting to know each other and, seeing who they are as people is the number one thing for me.
Of course. And, it feels like season just ended.
Yeah.
But then again, you look right down the road and August will be here before you know it. But what are some of the goals you have this offseason, some of the reasons you want to build on?
Yeah, I think obviously want to, get faster, keep getting my body better. I think this year, I was in pretty good shape, but I think you can always be in better shape. And I want to be able to, eat right, take it really, really serious so I can put myself in the best position possible, to take more hits, that kind of thing. And then also, during the game, I always keep my eyes downfield, but sometimes, when it's 2-man or situations like that, and you got to go get 7 or 8 yards, understanding the situation and knowing you can go get 7 or 8 yards in man. And then for my teammates, just holding the standard super, super high. Like I always tell my OC, I want to hold the standard so high this year when maybe I can't even reach it. Because I feel like ultimately that's where we'll strive to be better. I think that's why Indiana's so good is because Signetti and, from Fernando Mendoza are probably holding that standard so high where ultimately no one can even reach it. So.
Wow. So let's get into it. And you hit it, is the preparation. A lot of people think, it just starts in fall camp and there you go. Talk to us a little bit, you're going back to school and that part. Talk to us about what your schedule looks like. Is you're going to have your weights, you're going to have your extra things that you got to do football with, you got academics, but then that time you got to spend that extra time, which we know how you study football and that part of that extra time in the film room. And you only get so much time with your coach and college football. Like a coach told me one time, one of the least coached sports in America is college football. It's basically because of the time constraints. Talk to our audience a little bit about the young quarterbacks and they're looking to be like you is what that looks like through this semester. Just as far as the weights and the time that you put in before you get to the summer and before you get to that fall camp.
Yeah. When I was obviously coming in as a freshman, I didn't really understand it. You just look at your schedule and think, I'm going to get there a little bit earlier or just do a little bit extra. And then I was obviously around Max Brosemer, who's on the Vikings now. And his preparation was the best, I've ever seen from coaches to players or anything. Because he's like, you'd go there and you'd always see his locker open. Even if you're there pretty early, he'd always beat you in. He was always watching film. Even in fall camp where we'd get home at 11 o'clock and have 7:30 a.m. stretch and, get ready for practice, his locker would be open at like 5:30 a.m. And that's where you're not getting much sleep. So I think obviously now I took that approach to where it's like that's where I'm going to ultimately get better is, winning the line of scrimmage, understanding the situation better than anybody on the field, using my mind pre-snap to where post-snap I can just react super, super fast, which I'm already pretty natural at, but even, turning that up another notch. But yeah, January is we have like 6 a.m., like the county fair like y'all were talking about.
Okay.
So I usually get there pretty early, like 4:45 or 5 to, watch 30 to 45 minutes of film and then be able to still do some stuff in my body before the run or whatever it is that morning. And then I'll have class or whatever and then come back and do some more football stuff with mostly all the other guys, wideouts, running backs, get some extra work in, board work. I really like doing board work, giving somebody a play and making them draw it up. So what they see from the quarterback's lens, what the thought process is, how many steps are they getting to on their route, what number are they in the read, just for timing purposes and obviously so you can talk through things. And then you get the spring ball, and then spring ball, it's pretty busy as well. And then you have the month of May off. Then you get the summer, have summer conditioning. And then it's kind of like the same as winter. It's just summer now, and it's outside more compared to the winter. And then you get the fall camp. In fall camp, you're there all day. So, I mean, but I always talk to Coach Harbaugh. It kind of stuck in with me was you win. He always told me, like, you win the game Monday through Friday with your preparation, with your film study, with the players, after practice getting the reps in. Because there could be a play that you've never repped, and like third down, you got to execute it. And I think third down, people don't understand how different third down is from first and second down with fronts, coverages. Like we've had games where we've had 7 different fronts on third down compared to first and second down, you only have 4 down, or you have maybe odd eye mixed in there compared to third down where it's, so many different things. So I think, truly understanding the game of football and situations is, what Coach Fleck and Coach Harbaugh have really taught me at Minnesota.
Well, third down's a whole different commodity.
Yeah, it's way different.
You can see it on TV, but if you're at a live game, and I got to watch you live this year. It's just chaotic.
Yeah, it's way different.
It's way different. Well, let's talk about this, and not talking about the future, but this has come out with a lot of guys. It's just like you that are in college or top quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah,
and with NIL, there were supposed to be maybe 5 or 6 were on the top quarterbacks class coming out this year, and right now only 1 or 2 are coming out just because of the NIL money. People forget this is when this is awesome. Russell Wilson won the Super Bowl. He was making $500,000. Well, these guys were making more than that.
Yeah.
And I know you're not there yet, but is that a dilemma, or is that talked about even in your locker room positions and different things like that, where they can actually financially make a little bit more money staying in college than they can go in the NFL a little bit?
Yeah. I think you see it everywhere. You kind of think, like, you see all these reports of, quarterbacks getting offered $4 or $5 million to come back instead of the NFL. But honestly, our locker room does a really good job of not necessarily talking about the money, because I think it can get really toxic. Because, I mean, if you're a wideout and I'm a wideout and I'm making $200,000 more than you, and you ended up having a better season than me, then that person's ultimately going to want more money. And if he knows you're making more money, especially. So I really try to I think we got to do a really good job of keeping the locker room out of the money talks, because ultimately I think it's just cancer and it's very, very toxic. But I think it's definitely a thought that you have, especially if you're a second or third round pick, like you're projected and then you have another year eligibility. Like, why not come back and get a second or third round money is what they're going to probably pay you off of, maybe a little more, and then boost your stock and go first round. But I think if you're a first round pick, you should go, in my opinion, just because there's not much better you can do than that.
Well, there's not, and then you talk about that, and that's something they with the NFL guys, you see a lot of guys coming out in that part. Talk to us a little bit about this. You got a great support group. I mean, you got a big family. They're at every game. And that part of it, and talk to us how important that is. We talk about the highs and lows, and then after game, which might be a 5 or 3 minute deal where you get to see your support group. But talk to us a little bit about your family and just how supportive they are with you being so far away, and that part of it, and getting to games, and how important that is to you.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, even like in the spring, my mom had got sick and wasn't able to come to like the family day, and it just it always feels a little weird when you don't really think about it, but when they're supposed to be there and things like that. So games, it's obviously super natural, and I'd say it'd feel weird if they weren't there, because usually pregame, like 40 minutes till kickoff, I try to just look up there and see my dad's face before the game, just to it just gives you that relaxing feeling of I don't really know how to explain it. You're kind of in a different headspace during pregame or during the game, but just having that feeling that your family's always there for you. I mean, you can't take it for granted. It's obviously, I'm very blessed that they can come to every single game, and it's an awesome feeling, them being able to support me in the Big Ten, which is, me as a little kid would have never thought I'd be playing in front of 100,000 on the road at Ohio State. So I think, games like that are just awesome.
People are rowdy too.
Yeah, it was really loud. It was loud for 2 quarters, and then it wasn't. But
break.
Well, you speak on that a little bit. What's it like playing in that conference and some of those hostile environments that you've been to?
Yeah, I think it was great for me this year. I mean, all the 3 big road games we played, we got beat pretty good. I mean, it was Oregon, Iowa, and Ohio State were the 3 really big ones, and those are – I mean, Oregon was just in the Final Four, and then Ohio State lost to Miami, obviously. But, I mean, those environments are – I mean, those are what you dream of, obviously, as a kid. So, I mean, I'd be super – I honestly was more relaxed on the road games just because you have nothing to lose, you know what I mean? No one knows you there. I mean, everyone's against you. I mean, you don't have much to lose, especially against both of them being top 5 teams in the country. But, I mean, it was awesome. I really enjoyed those games. Even though you lose, it's like you learn so much from them, like how to – like the first road game at Ohio State, that was super loud. We used the silent cadence, and I had, 2 or 3 plays where, you give the hand and you might have to snap it 2 or 3 seconds earlier than you think. And I had like 2 delay games that game. So you kind of figure that out and you get better at those things as the year goes on. Because, I mean, all those 3 road games are super loud. Like you can't even really, talk hardly. Like I got to go tackle to tackle to make a protection call. And then sometimes you might see the protection call late and you don't have time to adjust it. So you got to know who you're hot off, know your running back's probably not getting out of protection, things like that. But, I mean, I really enjoyed it. And I think, people don't realize, like, even when you're playing, like Purdue, when we were there 2-4 or something when we played them, and they were still so tough. Like, people don't understand, the Big Ten and the SEC conferences like that where you're going week after week after week where all these guys are in that conference. No matter if they're 10-0 or 2-8, it's going to be a grind because those guys want to win just as bad as you do. And they're obviously at that level for a reason. So, I mean, you got to really do a good job taking care of your body, as you know, because it's just 7 days. Then you have a Sunday where you might be off or doing recovery, and then you practice on Monday or Tuesday, and you got to get your body back right and your mindset back right. And the biggest thing for me was we had like a 6-week stretch in the Big Ten, and you don't really think about it. Like my coach told me you're going to get really tired, and I was like, no, I'm not. Like it's football. And then your body's getting tired. You're learning a new game plan every single week with new coverages, new protection calls, a completely different third down where it could be simpler or it could be way crazier, and you got to be in the facility way more, even though you might only get, 7 third downs, 8 third downs, which each one of those is so important, which you realize throughout the season. But by the Iowa week, I was just completely mentally drained, and that was the 5th game of the stretch, and I was completely just exhausted. And I think that's one thing I can take next year is, maybe sleeping a little more, going to bed a little earlier, or, getting out of the facility maybe just an hour earlier just to protect my mind and my mental health and things like that. Because ultimately, it gets really challenging when you're on a 6-week stretch of playing Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, and it's Ohio State, Iowa, Oregon, Michigan State, and it gets really tough. So I think, just using all the information I learned from this year and being able to talk to people about it, seeing what I can, change and do differently, I think is ultimately the best thing.
Sure. And on top of that, you're taking classes.
Yeah.
I assume, right?
Yeah.
How was that part?
It was good this season. They actually, so I usually do more in person in the spring because it's not in season, but they helped me out and got me online this year during the season, which was really helpful. I obviously had to do schoolwork, but I was online, so I didn't have to worry about going to classes. It was awesome, but I still had to do tutoring and stuff. But I mean, it was great that I was online, so that helped a lot.
As a game teacher.
Yeah.
Well, last question here. What's the next step for Drake Lindsey? What's the next step for the Minnesota Gophers?
Yeah, I think the last 2 seasons we've obviously went 8-5. So I think sitting down with the coaches, sitting down with the leaders of the team, and seeing what was the negative things and the positive things, because I think there's obviously some things we need to change within the players, having a higher standard, and sometimes there can be some complaining and people not understanding their complete role, and that's one thing that I think I guarantee you Indiana does such a good job is the 3rd string left tackle knows he's the 3rd string left tackle, and he's not complaining about it or saying anything negative about it. He just understands his role and knows what he needs to do to improve. And I think when you find a team that can truly understand their role and truly understand what they need to be better at is ultimately, where you're going to, continue to get those, those big time wins and those close games. So I think that's one thing we got to do a lot better of.
Well, that's awesome. Like I said, we're always checking your work. We're checking every Saturday and Thursday if you play a little bit of on TV. Drake's on this, that, and watching it. And we appreciate you coming back. And it was interesting to find out, you were sitting here this summer and you're fixing to get thrown in the fire.
Yeah.
Going to, Ohio State and all these places and just seeing the growth and listening to you, the growth that you made, and look forward to watching next year to get prepared. And we're always pulling for you. And like I said, we appreciate you coming on and We'll have you back every year because we'll be checking
Oh, yeah.
there all the time.
I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir.